During last week's conversation with MKUltra survivor, Lynn, we discussed briefly some of the documents the CIA released that touched slightly on their psychological testing done under MKUltra. What I am about to read to you is a redacted CIA document from 1951. 2 children were used in the experiment, and the document explains both are young girls. Although this document does not talk about sexual testing, please be advised that what you are about to hear may be triggering if you are a survivor. This document is proof of one type of testing the CIA did on children, involving being in a trance state and ensuring that their subjects had complete amnesia. The document we will be posting on the discussion group on Facebook, so please come find it and join in on the discussion. Two files. Subject: SI and H experimentation. 25th of September, 1951. On the 25th of September, 1951, the writer conducted SI and H experimentation with subjects. In view of the successful experimentation of Tuesday, the 18th of September, 1951, it was decided to continue experiments along more or less related lines during this session. However, prior to actually beginning the more complex experiments, several simple post-H were worked with both of the girls participating. In this connection, it is interesting to note that whereas subject A was capable on each test, tried of producing the desired post-H effect, subject B was unable to do so. No explanation was offered for this, but it should be noted for the record that Official 1 and the writer did not make continuous and serious efforts to produce the desired effect for these simple post-H tests. The first major experiment of the evening was set up as follows, without previous explanation to either child. Both subjects were placed in a very deep trance state, and while in this state, the following instructions were given. Subject was instructed that when she wakened, she was to proceed to the room. She was told that while there, she would receive a telephone call from an individual whom she would only know as Joe. This individual would engage her in a normal telephone conversation. During this conversation, this individual would give her a code word, and upon mentioning the code word, would go into a deep SI trance state, would be normal in appearance with her eyes open. Subject was then told that upon conclusion of the telephone conversation, she would proceed to the ladies' room, where she would meet a girl who was unknown to her. She was told that she would strike up a conversation with this girl, and during the conversation, she would mention the code word New York to this other girl, who, in turn, would give her a device and further instructions, which were to be carried out by subject. She was told that after she carried out the instructions, she was to return to the operations room, sit on the sofa, and go immediately into a deep sleep state. Subject was instructed that upon wakening, she would proceed to the room where she would wait at the desk for a telephone call. Upon receiving the call, a person known as Jim would engage her in normal conversation. During the course of the conversation, this individual would mention a code word. When she heard this code word, she would pass into SI trance state, but would not close her eyes and remain perfectly normal and continue the telephone conversation. She was told that thereafter, upon conclusion of the telephone conversation, she would then carry out the following instructions. Subject, being in a complete SI state at this time, was then told to open her eyes and was shown an electric timing device. She was informed that this timing device was a bomb, and she was then instructed how to attach and set the device. After subject had indicated that she had learned how to set and attach the device, she was told to return to a sleep state and further instructed that upon concluding the aforementioned conversation, she would take the timing device, which was in a briefcase, and proceed to the lady's room. In the lady's room, she would be met by a girl whom she had never seen, who would identify herself by the code word New York. After identifying herself, subject is then to show this individual how to attach and set the timing device, and further instructions would be given to the individual that the timing device was to be carried in the briefcase to the room, placed in the nearest empty electrical light plug, and concealed in the bottom left-hand drawer of the desk, with the device set for 82 seconds and turned on. Subject was further instructed to tell this other girl that as soon as the device has been set and turned on, she was to take the briefcase, leave the room, go to the operations room, and go to the sofa and enter a deep sleep state. Subject was further instructed that after completion of instructing the other girl and the transferring to the other girl of the bomb, she was to return at once to the operations room, sit on the sofa, and go into a deep sleep state. For a matter of record, immediately after the operation was begun, it was noted that a member of the chair force was cleaning the floor in the ladies' room, and subsequently, both subjects had to be placed at once again in a trance state and instructions from the ladies' room to room 3. It should be noted that even with the change of the locale and the transfer point, the experiment was carried off perfectly without any difficulty or hesitation on the part of either of the two girls. Each girl acted out her part perfectly. The device was planted and set as directed, and both girls returned to the operations room, sat on the sofa, and entered a deep sleep state. Throughout, their movements were easy and natural, and the member of the chair force and the guard were, to all intents and purposes, completely unaware of what was taking place, although they could clearly observe the movements of Subject 1 and Subject 2. Both the girls were awakened. They were given instructions. Subject unable to recall any of the incident, except going into the desk in the room, before the experiment was completely underway. However, subject had partial recall of some of the incidents that transpired. The entire experiment, from original instructions to conclusion, consumed 27 minutes, and it should be noted for the record that at the conclusion of the experiment, subject did not completely respond to the instructions to awake, and hence was returned to a sleep state and reawakened. Both subjects were, of course, cleared of all post-H words, etc., in the experiment before awakening. This long and rather complex experiment was regarded by Blank and the writer as being successful, although subject partial recall of some of the incidents was not according to instructions. But it should be remembered that subject memory in such matters has continually been remarkable, and she has remembered from week to week numbers which she had memorized considerable time before. The second major experiment of the evening concerned the proposition of whether or not individuals of normal and proper training, background, and teaching would commit an act which they would not, under normal circumstances, do. This experiment carried on as follows. Both subjects were placed in a deep SI state and were instructed that they were to proceed, when awakened, to the laboratory and sit at the desk and wait for a telephone call. Each girl would be called in turn and would be given a code word. Upon completion of the telephone call, the girls were told that they would proceed to the operations room, where they would find a man lying on the sofa who had passed out from drinking or was drugged and was possibly asleep. It was further explained to them that this man had been picked up in a local bar and brought here to this room. They were instructed that they were to enter the room as quietly as possible, approach the individual, making certain they did not awaken him, and examine his clothing and determine if he carried a wallet. They were told that if the individual carried a wallet, they were to remove the wallet from this person and immediately and quietly leave the room. They were told further that they were to deliver the wallet to a person who would be waiting in the dark room, and after that, they were told that they would return to the desk, put their heads down, and go into a deep sleep. In each case, after the girls were called on the phone and given the designated code word, they went into the operations room and removed a wallet first, and then acted as bodies in an instant case. Both girls were under observation at all times in the act of removal, and both moved very cautiously, in a very deft manner, and removed the item as instructed. This experiment is regarded by Blank and the writer as being successful, although as in all of these experiments, it must be borne in mind that a possibility exists that the subjects realize that the experiments are nothing more than this, and are not in fact actual operations. Although by instructing and by wording, every effort has been made to conceive the subjects, when they are in an SI state, that these are actual operations. The word experiment or test is never used under any circumstances when the operations are being carried out. For a matter of record and of interest is the fact that at the conclusion of this experiment, which ran about 22 minutes, subject refused to awaken as instructed, and it was necessary to return her to a trance state and again awaken her before she became fully awake. Furthermore, for a matter of record, it should be noted that again in this case, subject had a complete amnesia for the activity, whereas other subject, although instructed to have complete amnesia, had a partial recall of events.